Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is Tuesday, January 30th, 2024, and this is a special meeting of the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. I hereby call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda will be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we are going to take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, we are going to move on to the public comment portion of the agenda. I'm going to start by reading this disclaimer, and then we have several people speaking, and there's only a maximum of 30 minutes allowed for this portion of the agenda. So I'm going to call up a few at a time. So if you guys are ready to go, that way we can get as many people to speak as possible. Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to any criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and discussion at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be allotted to this portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. We are going to start with Julie Larson. Behind Julie Larson, we'll have Rachel Belchamber, and then we have Melissa Lopez behind that.
My name is Julie Larson. I'm a math specialist at Rancho Santa Fe Elementary. Good evening, President Zaidama and members of the governing board. I'm Julie Larson again. Tonight, I'm here to address the proposed budget cuts impacting our math and reading specialist programs. As you're aware, Title I schools serve vulnerable communities where access to resources can be limited and families face economic challenges, often impacting their children's education. In this context, the presence of math and reading specialists are really vital to student success. Over the past 5 years, I've witnessed this governing board make hard decisions that were in the best interest of children at all times. Allow me to present data to highlight the effectiveness of our math program. In the 2022-2023 academic year, students in our math program showed a growth coefficient, which is our yearly target of 2.03%, surpassing the school-wide growth of 1.88. This is really an amazing achievement. This indicator shows that we had 0.15% higher than our student populations that include traditional academy. Included in this data, of course, those students who are in the Math Tier 3 programs are also represented. So if you look at that statistically, their data would be lower without our kids bumping up that growth coefficient. Similarly, our iReady diagnostic data reveals substantial growth among our Tier 3 students with a 79% increase in growth, which is really, really quite wonderful, as opposed to our school growth of 65%, which is still an amazing growth, and we're very, very happy to celebrate that. But I want to go back. That's 14% higher than the children who were not in our Tier 3 math program. If we could look at this achievement years down the road, this is our, year and a half Imagine what this could look like 3 or 4 years down the road. And what are we in the business of? Educating children and doing what's best for children. At LESD, we pride ourselves on doing what's best for kids in hard situations. So I'm just urging you to please look at the proposed budget cuts. Our math specialist and reading specialist programs, they align with our 4 pillars. So I invite the board, please come visit our school. We would love to have you come for the day and see all of the things that we are doing to positively impact student achievement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel Belchamber, and then Melissa Lopez, and then Leanne Migray.
Rachel Belchamber. I am here on behalf of my daughter who attends Verado Elementary, and we are affected by the recent boundary rezoning or boundary changes. First, I'd like to start off with saying that the information that was sent out back in November and then in December was very unclear. If you were to just look at a map based on our neighborhood, you would think that we were going to Bell and Soto. You would also think that we would have a new school built because of how it was color coded. It was just sent in very clear terms last Friday how we were being affected, that our kids were being sent over 30 minutes away to Thomas Heck, which is going to be your quote unquote magnet school, for just a temporary time, which is 3 years. I looked up and I've seen that you guys haven't submitted plans for this new school in our neighborhood, nor permitting. But again, you say it's going to be 3 years, but there's no plans in place. I feel like you guys didn't really take into consideration anybody in Canyon Views, our neighborhood. We had 0 representation on your boundary committee. The representative for our school was a Verado resident, and one of the staff members is also a Verado resident and Verado employee. I just feel like there could have been other considerations, like putting bungalows on existing campuses that are close to our neighborhood. And it's just temporary, 3 years. And I think that's all I can say right now.
Next, we have Melissa Lopez, Leanne Migray, and then Katie Hill.
Hi, I am Melissa Lopez. I am also here regarding the boundary change. I'm gonna try not to cry. I have 2 kids that are affected, one in kinder and one in first. They love their teachers, they're thriving, perfect attendance. We live in Canyon Views and we're being told that they're gonna have to be sent 30 minutes away. Responses I've gotten is that that's temporary. 3 years is not. There's a lot of articles that talk about consistency that kids need. I feel that my husband and I, we did that by choosing a home that's 2 miles away from Verado currently. Again, they're thriving. We love the teachers. The teachers thank us for our support. My fear is when they go to Thomas Heck, they won't have that same support from myself and my husband. It's 30 minutes away. If they forget something, to have to go back and back, it just seems irresponsible. The buses in our neighborhood have been canceled more than 2-3 times this week. Just recently, it was canceled at 2 o'clock when school dismissal is at 2:25. If the school is over 30 minutes away, what will the parents do? How will they get their kids? We see kids already at the bus stop, and when the bus is canceled, they end up just going home. Attendance will go down for our neighborhood. These students, it doesn't seem like they're getting the chance to thrive. We're trying to see it from your perspective, and it just doesn't make any sense. If it's about money, I can tell you that myself as well as many other parents were considering homeschool, private school, charter schools, and our money will follow. We also are told that open enrollment will be an option, but if you look at the current website, It says that while a few schools in the district will have space, some schools will be closed because of growing student populations. This makes me feel Verrado is now not an option, neither are the schools nearby. To say that I'm heartbroken is an understatement. We trusted the district to do what's best for our kids. We feel let down, we feel disappointed. We do not feel that there is any way that this benefits our kids. It feels like it was just our neighborhood that was targeted, and we really challenge you guys to see it from our point of view on how you would feel sending your kids over 30 minutes away. Keep in mind, Litchfield, Camelback construction all the time. I personally would not feel comfortable sending my kids on a bus for that long. It's not safe. The current school, it's currently a middle school. My kids already fear going into school sometimes with bigger kids. Now they're going to be with even bigger kids. It's hard to see my kids thriving and that being taken away from them. We feel like portables would be an option. There's so many other options that could be made. Thank you for your time. And I'm sorry for crying, but it means a lot to us as parents. Thank you.
Okay, we have Leanne, Katie Hill, and then Morgan Russell.
Good evening. Good evening, board members, or President Zaidama, board members. I'm so glad to be here to speak. I'm extremely nervous, so hopefully my voice lasts. I am Leanne Migray. I am a teacher in the district. I am also a longtime parent and resident of the district. And I believe all of you have been in my classroom. Many of you have been in my classroom while I've been here. I just wanted to speak about the staffing budget. I know we're told, we're not going to lose jobs and whatever, but I just wanted to give my perspective. I know budget cuts are necessary sometimes. I have to do budget cuts in my own home. We have to all figure this out until the state funds us properly. However, I do want to give my perspective. I work with 6 and 7-year-olds all day. We're learning how to read. We're learning how to get along. Sometimes behaviors become too much to handle. We are building up all of those foundational skills, and my reading specialist, my math specialist, my behavior coach are invaluable to my day. My children spend time with them. Many of my children across our school spend time with them every single day and build those relationships. And they get things from them that I can't always give to them when I have a full classroom of students in front of me. Without some of those supports, I will be taking more on my plate. I already feel overextended. My plate is full. I am sure I've heard many friends speak, many coworkers speak. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this. Also, classified staff. We have been so fortunate to have a first grade classified instructional aide who has, how did we teach first grade without an aide? I have no idea. And sharing this wonderful lady that we've had, I can't imagine being without her or that support. So I just wanted to urge you, as you are considering the numbers on the spreadsheet and how we can best fit, would you consider our classrooms and the children that are going to be impacted most? Teachers with heavier workloads don't work better. We work out, we burn out. And again, I know budget cuts have to be made, but I would just ask that when we're thinking about the bottom line, if we would consider the kids that are holding up that bottom line. Thank you.
Next up, we have Katie Hill, and then Morgan Russell, and then Anthony. I'm sorry, I cannot read your last name.
Good evening, board. It's been a while since I've been up here. My name is Katie Hill, and I'm the reading specialist at Litchfield Elementary. I've been with the district for 22 years, 21 of them on this campus. Reading, math, and behavior intervention are crucial components of our educational system, and possessing skills that relate to those are necessary for opening doors to knowledge and becoming successful in your life. And unfortunately, not all students embark on this journey with equal footing. Reading, math, and behavior interventionists serve as powerful tools to bridge the gap for those who face challenges in acquiring those fundamental skills. In this room behind me, our reading, math, and behavior interventionists who have dedicated their lives to educating students and then followed a calling to become specialized in that field. They make a difference in the lives of students, and they make a positive impact on the success of those students every day with every opportunity that they get. Who will do their job if they're not there? I service over 100 kids, 120 kids. I think Jackie probably services that many in the math room, and it wouldn't surprise me if Heather, our behavior interventionist, does the same. The students are going to continue to struggle. They're not going to go away just because there's not someone there to service them. I wish they would, honestly. I wish I got worked out of my job because I wasn't needed anymore. We do realize that the ESSER money is going away, but we also know that money was shifted in order to, with the new budget. And we just ask that you think about who is making a direct impact on student success when you make that choice. Thanks.
Okay, we have Morgan and then Anthony.
Hello, my name is Morgan Russell. I'm a parent of 2 children at Verrado Elementary School. I'm also their classified art teacher. I am also in Canyon Views and being directly affected by the boundary changes. One of my main concerns with that is the traditional academy situation that will happen. Both of my students, my children, the students will be sent there, and the plan that they have is, from what I'm being told, is that there's collectively about 30 students over all of the grades going there in TA, and they will split them and combine grades into one classroom, or they will not offer it. And then my kids' educational needs will not be met. And that's not okay with me. We will go to a charter school if we have to. And I know that in doing the magnet school and all of the changes that we're doing, we want people to stay in our district, and I do too. But my kids come first, and we already accepted a charter school in Surprise, because if I have to drive 30 minutes to get to a school, it will be of my choice, and it will not be L. Thomas Heck. The capacity rates at L. Thomas Heck, the need for people to be in those seats for funding is not my children's problem. The poor planning of not having a school built for the neighborhoods that continue to come up, not my kids' problem. They shouldn't have to suffer and be sent 30 minutes away because they don't have any other option. We, as a neighborhood, thought when we were going to get rezoned, we knew we weren't going to end up at Verrado. That's fine. We were thinking next closest, Berlin, probably not Heritage, maybe Scott Liddy. No, we will drive past every school in the district to get to L. Thomas Heck. And that's not okay. It's not. You're doing a whole neighborhood wrong for 3 years temporarily. So, thank you.
Our last speaker is going to be Anthony.
Hello, my name is Anthony Arzola. My child is being affected by the boundary changes. Most of my comments have already been addressed by other parents. I would just like to add that we got an email 3 days ago stating, I'll just read it for word. It says, "We saw extensive input from parents, community members, staff, with the commitment of understanding and incorporating the diverse needs of the prospective parents within the community." And I would like to say that most of our community, I feel like we didn't get involved in that. So we're the ones that we feel we've been affected the most. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, everyone, for speaking. We are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of agenda and consideration of consent agenda. I'll go through and see if anybody has anything that they would like to pull off. Ms. Clymer,
No, thank you.
Ms. Moran,
No, thank you.
Mr. Owens.
No, thank you.
I don't either. Anyone would like to make a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented. I'll second.
Having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Ms. Moran,
Yay.
Mr. Owens.
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Next, we are going to move on to action items, which is the approval of the academic calendar for 24-25 and 25-26 school year. This can be presented by Executive Director Benjamin.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the governing board. Last time we met, we went over the calendar. We talked about some of the changes that we were proposing. We also were seeking your feedback on some of that. We have the calendar for the 2024-2025 school year in front of you. We also added the 2025-2026 calendar, trying to provide some consistency for families as well as our staff. We are asking that you approve these two calendars as is, but I am here to answer any questions if you have any.
Does anyone, sorry, do you have any questions, Ms. Clymer?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
I do not have any questions. I would just like to note for those parents who were concerned about the potential changes in our feeder district, the Alafria Union High School District, that they recently adopted a calendar that looks very similar to ours, which I am pleased about, and I hope the families are pleased about as well, that that has nice alignment with the changes that we've made, including the early release Wednesdays.
Thank you. Yes, that is true. The calendar looks very, very similar, which is wonderful for families who have children in both districts.
Mr. Owens?
I don't have any questions about the calendar itself, like the dates. More just in regards to the early release Wednesdays that we have every Wednesday. One of the things I got recently, a lot of feedback was the usage of that time and how while it's kind of set aside for every Wednesday, that we might want to look at maybe some more flexibility in those Wednesdays. From either a school by school basis or just district wide, that there is some wiggle room. And if a teacher needs to opt out maybe for one weekend or, one Wednesday to just say, hey, I'm really behind, that we can find a way to, maybe have, like I said, an absence or an excused, hey, yep, you don't have to work on this week, but next week, yes.
Thank you
So-
for bringing that up. One of the things that we had mentioned when we shared the calendar last time was that we were going to be changing the collaboration and the professional development and combining that so that it gives the principals a little bit more choice, which actually will impact exactly what you're talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't have any questions either.
I will make a motion to approve the academic calendar for 24-25 and 25-26 school years as presented.
I will second.
Okay, having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Woohoo, we can tell you, everybody, we have a calendar for 2 years, everybody.
Thank you
And we're
so
gonna
much.
take a 2-minute break. Just a moment.
We need a what?
Sorry, guys, we are going to come back to order. I apologize. There was 2 additional comments that came in and did not get in our pile. I want to make sure they get to speak. So we are going to go and let those 2 people speak because we had not used all of our 30 minutes of time. So if Jesse is still here and Edward.
My name is Jesse Meneses. I'm an Arizona native. As of today, I've been here 42 years. I've seen a lot of growth. I've seen a lot of a population go away. I come from a small mining town south of here. So I've seen a lot. I've seen changes in Phoenix, changes in the surrounding area, just changing in politics, culture, everything that you would want to say. I could probably tell you I'm one of the only Arizona natives here. There's a lot of people that's here that is from a big melting pot. And hey, I welcome that. There's different cultures, different ideas, different ideals, different cultures, everything. But I'm going to tell you that I was once a child that was subjected to going to another school in the late 80s, early 90s. I can tell you that the bus that picked me up and transferred me on the freeway to another school that I couldn't even remember back in first, second grade was late dropping me off. And my parents weren't there to pick me up. School gates were already closed, and I walked home. During that walk, I was attacked in an alley. I was chased by 2 men. So this story has only come up. I've told my mom about it, and she doesn't remember. She was living a different life during that time. But my wife didn't know about it, other people didn't know about it, and it was a shock to them. What I'm proposing is that we look at what the plan is. I'm not saying you guys or anybody did anything wrong, but in my profession, we look at plans. If it doesn't work, or if it doesn't work for everybody that's in the plan that it affects, then we have to look at it, we have to stop, we have to pause, and then we have to find a different way. Find a different way that's going to not affect the children. There are different ways to do things. I hear budgets. Everything is like, hey, we'll do this or we'll do that. We'll meet in the middle. But we have to make sure that we're protecting our own kids. We have to meet halfways. I don't want the conversation of regentification here. Okay, that's just something that I never thought I would experience in my lifetime, or even feel that particular way. But as educated people here, I think we can find a different way to better the educational environment for our kids, and then the parents to be happy as well. That's it.
Last up, we have Edward, if he is still here. No, okay. If Edward is watching, please email the. Okay, we're gonna move back into our agenda where we were. We're gonna move on to discussion items. The first item is the staffing for school sites 24-25. Okay, we have Dr. Doozy, Jennifer Benjamin, Michael Vaughn, Matt Coley, someone from there, right, will be presenting. Wonderful. We have a large group of them going to present to us tonight.
All right, thank you. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Davidson, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the district's school staffing projections for the 2024-2025 school year. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic plan to foster academic excellence and innovation, retention of high-quality employees, and optimizing student success by improving the efficiency and effectiveness of our resources. We will start tonight by providing background information, talking through feedback gathered, and then discuss the proposed staffing model for certified and a justification. We'll then open it up for questions prior to moving to classified, and then following the same format. We will then finish up with an updated budget timeline for the 2024-2025 year. The process we followed was to look at what was needed to balance our budget. Actually started during last budget cycle when we began looking at multi-year projections. The work presented tonight is a very large step towards taking a multi-year approach to balancing our budget. In October, we began stakeholder engagement with principals and department directors around minimum staffing requirements to efficiently run a school. In November, we held additional activities with principals and directors around staffing with the concept of a balanced budget and getting some feedback from our Superintendent's Advisory Council, which we'll cover tonight. At the November 14th board meeting, we also summarized the need for budget cuts and discussed the reason for focusing our efforts on an updated staffing standard. In December, Finance and HR reviewed the stakeholder feedback and developed a potential staffing plan for cabinet discussion. Cabinet met and ensured the staffing plan aligned as best as possible to the academic vision of the district. In January, we've held 2 meetings with principals to discuss the proposed staffing for 2024-2025. We also surveyed the Superintendent's Advisory Council early in the process to gather feedback on if we should balance the budget by simply cutting the items from ESSER, which is one option, or blending the current M&O staffing model with the positions in ESSER. We also gathered feedback on positions directly supported by ESSER. 82% of the respondents shared that we should not just blanket cut ESSER positions, but take a blended approach, which you'll see represented in the model we're presenting tonight. 67% shared that of the ESSER positions, math specialists had the largest impact, and of the classified positions funded by ESSER, most respondents shared that the behavior technician was the most impactful. I'll now hand it over to Mr. Cooley to talk about the feedback we received from principals and walk you through the staffing model.
Based on various group activities we've held with principals, it was clear school leaders preferred options. The feedback we received was mostly unique to each campus and its needs. There was no one-size-fits-all solution. Returning school staffing back to pre-ESSER fund standard is no simple task. The upcoming slides overview a model which provides schools some choice in their staffing and the ability to meet the student needs while using data to drive the decision. Next, as a cabinet team, we discussed what positions are 100% critical to safely run a school and maintain consistency. It's worth noting this model does not account for any title funds or other grant opportunities that schools may currently have. Those options remain on the table for additional staff beyond what is outlined here. Those will be on a case-by-case basis, provided in the grant requirements. Which one? For certified staffing, we agreed all schools require Tier 1 support, which includes a principal, an assistant principal for K-8 and middle schools, and for K-5 schools where enrollment is 1,000 or higher. Teachers staffed as usual according to policy IIB and supporting regulations. Certified specials teachers staffed as usual. Lastly, an instructional coach and EL coordinator. Our next step was to look at Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, then provide schools with some choice options based on their student needs. The certified choice options are allocated based on student enrollment. Campuses may receive up to 4 additional certified FTE to support Tier 2 and Tier 3 learning environments. Shown now are examples of certified choice option positions. These are available for school leaders to select from using student outcomes and data to guide their decisions. I'll now turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Doozy and Mrs. Jennifer Benjamin for review of the rationale on certified staffing. We'll then open it up for questions from the governing board.
All right. Good evening, Madam President and governing board members, community, and all those watching online. We definitely wanted to provide justification of how we arrived at this recommendation of our proposed staffing model. One of the things that I did want to emphasize before I go over this slide is the blended approach that Executive Director Vaughn shared really represents exactly what our speakers spoke about today, and our principals and our staff, is that the positions that the board was able to fund with ESSER funds has created a very successful path for our schools. And we acknowledge that there has been so much growth from the hard work of these staff that have been dedicated to our behavior coach positions, our reading specialists, our math specialists. So we see their value and we know that they have made a difference at our schools. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money to guarantee all schools have these positions anymore. So when we were looking at the blended model, it allowed us to maintain all those great positions that were added during our ESSER funds, but do it in a way where principals and their guiding coalition, their groups based on data, could determine really what the direction is best for their campus. So with that said, we justify the certified staffing. Our allocated staffing, I like to kind of compare it to Tier 1. So when you look at providing a Tier 1 environment for our students, it is those things that are universal for everyone. So that's the allocated staff that you saw on the first slide that is guaranteed to every campus. When we talked about our choice options, we really compared that to our Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. So if we say Tier 1 is the universal staffing that all schools should have to be successful for all students, then what other staffing does the school need to make those interventions or respond to kids that need something different than what universally is provided? So that's where the certified choice options are considered those Tier 2 and those Tier 3 supports. Lastly, we also really wanted our principals to be able to use their data to drive these decisions. When you look at our overall district academic achievement data, that's a global view of how we're doing as a district in our academics. Each site has a specific story of how kids are responding and what specialists, what Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions are needed the most. We would love to be able to sit here in front of you tonight and say that we can continue to fund all of these things, but we simply can't. There is not enough money to do that. So allowing schools to have the option of what that Tier 2 and Tier 3 looks like that best serves their own community is the proposal that we're bringing here tonight. And the last thing is when we asked for that, what staff is required to effectively run a school, it was very different. And I just shared with you that's because their community is very different. So.
Members of the board, do you have any comments or questions for us?
Ms. Clymer?
I think I have 2 questions so far. Michael, I think the first one is for you. I'm trying to find which slide it was back to the beginning. I think it's slide 4, the very bottom point. We need to reduce the budget by 4.4 million. That number seems high to me, but I mean, I know it's high for everyone from what I remember. So can you break down what that 4.4 million comes from?
Yeah, so that number includes a couple of different things. That number is from my presentation in November to the governing board. It included our anticipated ESSER spending this year. It includes how much we overspent our M&O revenues last year. And it also includes the cost of 6 general education homeroom teachers that have just been part of our staffing standard that historically have been supported from gifts and donations funds, which is not a kind of reliable funding source. And so we wanted to bring those positions back home to M&O, so we wouldn't have to be looking every year at if we really had the funding there to support those positions, because those 6 positions really were part of the staffing standard that was based on the governing board approved class sizes. And so those positions weren't ones that we really could consider cutting, if that makes sense.
Okay, I understand. Talk to me about overspend of M&O revenues. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we receive revenue from the state to support our operations every year. That's driven by our student counts and student characteristics. And last year, when you look at our M&O operations, we spent about $70,000 more in M&O than our students generated funding for us. And so it's not a significant amount of that 4.4 million, but that $70,000 is part of that. And the reason I use that number as opposed to a forecast from this year is because there's a lot of estimates that come into forecasting, whereas that $70,000, I can say with confidence that we actually overspent M&O by that $70,000. That's end of the day, all the beans are counted. We overspent M&O by that amount. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My second question is, I'm not sure the best person to answer, so I'll let someone just grab the mic and give the answer. In terms of the certified staffing, when I look at both slides 8 and 9, can you refresh my memory in going back pre-COVID, before ESSER, before anything like that ever existed? I realized that every campus was different. It wasn't cookie cutter, but how close is this to that, right? How close is, if you were to have the allocated staffing on page 8 and 2 choices from page 9, is that directly correlated to what we had pre-COVID, or is that different?
So this is completely a different model than pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we had a principal, assistant principal on the middle school campuses, and we did not have them on K-8s at that time. We did have our 2 certified specials at the elementary level. That stayed the same. And we also had our middle school certified specials. We did have an instructional coach at each campus. We did not have an EL coordinator. That has been changed because there's a new laws that require a certain amount of hours for EL that were not in place prior to that. So that's going to look different. And then behavior coaches were usually split between 2 campuses before ESSER. So it was a 0.5 position. Advisors were at the middle school. We had 2 or 3 advisors on middle school campuses. There was no such thing as math specialists at the time. We did have math aides, but typically the math specialist, unless a Title I school funded it out of their Title I funds, that was not something that we had on our campuses. Reading specialists were on every K-5 campus. So that's something that you're looking at that's a little bit different. The reason you're seeing instructional coach on there twice is because currently at our K-8s, they have 2 instructional coaches. One is paid out of ESSER funds so that they can have a K-5 and a middle school. This gives the principal that choice if they wanted to keep 2 instructional coaches. So they would still automatically get the 1. And then based on their FTE, they could choose to have 2. And then, of course, permanent substitutes were not a thing back then. So it is completely different. Every school will be able to choose 2 of those things. So if you were to say that the school chose a behavior coach and a reading specialist, that would mimic closer to what we used to have. But now a school has the option of maybe not having the behavior coach and choosing a math specialist and a reading specialist, or they might have 3 FTEs and they could have all of them. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I was more just looking at numbers. I mean, I know positions change. I was just more looking at numbers of how many people we had, but you answered that question along with it. So one quick question about the student advisor. So right now, I think what you just said and what my knowledge remembers is that each grade, 2 to 3 advisors on every middle school campus.
Correct. The K-8s have 1 as well.
So.
And they also have a behavior
We would
coach.
be, they couldn't, I mean, they would be losing one either way. I mean, they have 3 now, and we're saying you can have 2 of these people. So you're going to be losing an advisor on the middle school campus, plus you don't have access to math, reading, or any of the other things. Is that right? I mean,
Possibly. It depends on
possibly,
how
okay.
they're choosing to use it. So if you are at a middle school campus that has 4 FTE and they want to choose 3 student advisors, they could do that. And then they could choose a math specialist or a reading specialist if they had 4 FTE.
And what is the range from 2 to 4? What's the breakdown in terms of student enrollment?
Give us just a second.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be exact. I mean, how many schools fall into those? I mean, our middle schools are fairly large, so, I mean, they have higher populations, but I didn't know if they would all fit into the higher FTE range or the lower.
You'd be looking at, for middle school, the range could be from 600 to 799. It could be from 800 to 999. And that would change by a 0.5 FTE. 1,000 above would be 4 FTE.
So the bottom would be 3, and then 3.5, and then 4 is what?
The range is from 2 to 4.
Right, but you said 6 to 799 is how many people?
2.5.
2.5. And then 8 to 999 is
3.
3, and then 4 is the 1,000 plus. Okay,
Correct.
got it. Okay, I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, Board Member Clammer's questions answered some of my questions, but I want to know a little bit more about the feedback process that you got. Obviously, we heard tonight from some folks in these positions, and we've gotten some emails from other staff members. From what I saw in the presentation, the feedback that you got was from the principals. They were actively involved, but can you tell me more about that? Because I feel a disconnect. If the principals are saying, this is the bottom line minimum we need to run this campus, and these other positions, we don't want to lose anything. Everybody knows that. We would love to keep everyone, but we also know that we don't have the money to be able to do that without some other trade-offs, which I'll get to in a minute. But I want to know more about why you think there might be a disconnect, or if we can have the principals address some of those things as well with their staff to maybe, because I know we're making this high-level decision. And so, but we're making it on your recommendation. And it sounds like you got recommendation from the people who know their campuses the best. So can you tell me more about that feedback process?
Yeah, so we primarily utilized the all administrator meetings that we have to do kind of hands-on activities with the principals. So one of the activities, for example, we put the principals in groups based on type of school, and by type of school I mean K-5, middle, K-8, and we asked them to answer a handful of questions. What staff is absolutely required to run a school, what staff is a nice to have, what innovative ideas do you have, and what additional comments do you have for us? And we gathered that feedback. And then at another meeting, I had developed a tool that allowed principals certain autonomy to play with a staffing standard and see the impact that certain changes would have to a budget. There were some challenges with that activity. Just sometimes the spreadsheet worked, sometimes it didn't. And so we did give the principals the opportunity to just email us feedback if they weren't able to get the tool to work. But ultimately what the feedback really showed us was that it was different at every single campus. And that's where the concept of this model came from, is let's decide what's absolutely has to be at every school for consistency's sake and safety's sake, and then give as much choice as possible to the individual principals, not to make decisions based on their gut, but to make decisions based on what their data for their students is telling them is needed to support their campus. Because the other thing we heard from the governing board and others is that doing these cuts in a data-driven way was vitally important. And the only way we could really come up with, because the data is so different at the various schools, was that you make those decisions at the level that that data really exists, which is at the individual school and classroom and grade level. And so that's how we both gathered a lot of the feedback, but how we came to a lot of these conclusions and this structure based on that feedback. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, it does. But being that, oh, go ahead, Dr. Davidson. My apologies.
Thank you, Ms. Moran and President Zeidma. Just wanted to add a piece, Ms. Moran, as you asked about the disconnect, and I don't, this is me personally, but just having worked closely with our principals and team through this process, I don't know if I would say, I don't know if I would classify it as a disconnect. I think what we've heard tonight, and I know for those in the crowd and those that aren't here, but we know that Litchfield Elementary School District's overall budget is close to 90% in salary and benefits. So unfortunately, when we're talking about budget and its connection to the loss of it, it falls back on people, and that's a hard part. And I think what we know to be true is our team members have had great success. Those supplemental positions that were created through the use of ESSER funds have been awesome. Our kids have benefited from that, and I think what we're hearing is just, hey, remember the work we've done. It's important, and how it's making a difference in the lives of children. And so I think that's the angst that we are feeling more so than a disconnect, because I think our principals also are those people's greatest advocates. And I without a doubt, knowing those meetings that Mr. Vaughn's talking about, we would want to add more if we could, and they would speak on behalf of that. So I think that's what we're working on.
I think that's fair. And I would agree that we would want to add more. I mean, the purpose of the ESSER funds was to help close the learning gap, the learning loss that happened from COVID. And in our district, it worked. It worked so well. We don't want to have to make any cuts because we've been able to see what a better funded school district can do. But we're not in charge of the funding. So I would get in touch with your state legislators. They have a little something to do with that funding piece. So it sounds like the principals will make the decision for their campus. Being that this is a new process, will this be a decision that's being coached to them to say, hey, here's the things you should look at. Here's what Dr. Duzzi, I know you're great with the data, as is Jennifer Benjamin. Is that something that you're going to help them with to determine this new process?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Governing Board Moran. Yes, we have already started that work and looking, as you know, all of our principals have a site level scorecard with specific academic goals under student success, a people goal, a service goal. And so I'm already working with them to identify and use data to say, okay, based on the data that you know about your school, what role, because I know it's hard, right? Because roles equals people, and people is what makes this difficult, right? So when we really talk about what role, what position is going to be the most benefit to your campus to reach those goals based on your data, based on how kids are responding, based on future needs that we're predicting, right? And especially with the Litchfield learner work coming up, looking at, those Litchfield learner attributes. Those are a lot of things that we have been talking through. We talked about that in a big group as part of their mid-year reflection. We also are talking about that specifically, about what data will they use to decide what roles their campus needs for that tier 2, tier 3 intervention or support for their students. And it's hard. It's been a very hard conversation because those roles are filled by people that they care for, that care for our kids, and they have worked so hard and accomplished great things. So it really is hard to take the person out of the role that you need for your campus to propel the most needed areas for the future. So that's really what principals face. I think sometimes we want choice, right? But when we have a choice, there comes this ownership and this bigger heartfelt decision making. And so I think our principals do appreciate having choices, but it is hard to make that choice. I'll be honest, it is. But we have to, that's what leadership is about, is we have to face the data and make the best decisions for what we believe will move the individual schools forward in the best way. Of course, all of those roles would help a school. But what Tree, I know, prioritizing which roles are going to make the biggest impact.
Understood. So what I think I'm also hearing is that we do not expect to riff anyone. We always have positions, people who leave due to attrition. So we're just expecting to do some shuffling where needed.
Yeah, Executive Director Cooley and I have been looking at turnover rates and kind of the staffing as a whole, and we do not anticipate anyone not having a choice to remain with Litchfield Elementary School District next year. It may look like a different role, but everyone who wants to continue with us should have that opportunity.
And that's a big cultural change for us. And I think, and verify this if this is right, but if these, I don't like the word non-essential, but I'm going to use it in this context. If these non-essential tier 2, tier 3 positions, or let's just say flexible positions, are based on the data, then we could have changes every year, or how often will we look at this and we might have to shuffle people more often. It isn't something that we normally would do.
Right.
So I think this is a big change.
Bridget, do you want to talk to that? I know we had talked about it being a multi-year process and decision.
Yes, absolutely. So when and this is something the principals are still getting into the work of, but definitely looking at data. When we look at data, we look a few years back as well. So we look at trends in data. So really looking at what is going to be something we can commit to for a few years, right? To get the most out of it. Now, that's not to say that a principal may decide next year that, hey, this really wasn't the right role. I really need this role. I mean, that could be a conversation that we have to have. So, but I don't think I'm prepared to give you the exact years, but that would be the vision of a staffing decision, because really doing it for 1 year, it's not gonna, to really know the data, you're gonna need to implement it with some fidelity and then evaluate it.
I agree. Having it for a longer term will let you know if it's doing what you expect it to be doing or not. My last question for this section is, because we don't want to give up anything, what other trade-offs have been considered? For example, have we looked at increasing class sizes? No one really wants that, but would that be preferable to not having a math specialist on your campus? Or have we looked at low to no pay increases? Again, nobody wants that, but would that be a trade-off that people think would be worth it?
So there's a couple things to that. When we did some of those feedback activities, class sizes were on the table for that. We only heard from one principal that was a palatable option for them. So we didn't dig too deep into that, but let me do it for a second with you. An issue that would come from changing class sizes is, honestly, depending how the numbers fall and with the boundary changes, me trying to estimate what kind of change we would need for the budget impact, I would be throwing darts if I'm honest with you. The other thing is, this is going to need to be a multi-year balancing of the budget. Based on what I know, how much money this is going to save us is dependent on the choices made. So I don't have real numbers for you tonight, but it shouldn't balance the budget. And so what I mean by that is, we're going to need to continue making changes into the future year. And that's where I would imagine if we were going to change class sizes, that more reasonably belongs, because we would then have a year of data of what actually happened with the boundary changes. We'd be able to make a more reasoned decision on that. One of the things that's really nice about this type of model for staffing that the team and I have talked about is we're looking at this in terms of a budget cut because that's what we're facing. But let's say everyone in this room, calls their legislature and all of a sudden I have more staffing that I can provide. It's very easy in this model to just say, okay, that 2 to 4 FTE is now 3 to 5 or 3 to 6. We still are providing what we think is minimally required, and we're giving you as much option as we can afford to give you. And so that's another reason why I like this as a model, is it really simplifies also adding additional resources to it, to schools.
I agree. And as was stated earlier, if our Title I schools have funds, they can also pick and choose maybe from this flexible list to add what they need. Okay, that's it for me for now.
Mr. Owens.
This volunteer job just keeps getting easier and easier. So when I look at this list of options, and I mentioned earlier about kind of the idea of principals getting to choose some of their Wednesday activities and, letting staff do things. I do like the idea of local control, at a principal level, but I also have a hard time thinking that if a position is that important, that it's going to be that important at every school, at every campus, right? So like you've got this, you can choose and you can choose. Well, I think that honestly, from a leadership standpoint, comes from the top. And so, if one school thinks they need a math specialist and one needs a reading, but another, I have a hard time thinking that there's actually like a list and it's a 1 through 5, not a you get to choose.
Thank you for that question, Member Owens. I have the situation that I'm thinking of is typically K-5s have had reading specialists. But at the middle school, math specialists have been more powerful, or have been something that they're looking at, because when you're looking at the data, 8th grade math is what gives you the extra bonus points, where 3rd grade reading is what gives the K-5.
So at least from a K-5, like apples to apples, not a middle school versus a K-5. Yes.
And we're looking at this as a model that can be for all of our schools.
But still, so all K-5s should have the same specials, and all K-8 should have the same specials. In elementary, then they would have the K-5 and the K-8, right?
I was just going to say that, remember, anything that we put in our tier 1 universal, that means less FTE in the opportunity to do something that's special, like for that campus based on their data. So if we say every K-5 gets a reading specialist, just knowing that now they will not have as much FTE, because you're taking that money, putting it into the allocated staff model. Therefore, there's not as much choice across the board for everyone.
Mr. Owens, also just to add, and this is where I think the power of our upcoming development of our strategic plan connects with the Litchfield learner qualities. To your point, there will become a time where we will say, our vision is to get our kids here. How will we best do that? These position types will allow us to do that. We're not quite there yet. And so in the midst of what we've been charged to do, this is allowing our principals still to have what they need to be successful. However, I would think that strategic plan and the work that we're going to do will help drive some additional staffing conversations in the near future.
Yeah, but haven't we talked about the idea that if you were to go to one school and transfer to another school in the district, it would look the same. Like obviously the culture is different, principles wide, but at least the learning and how they're learning the same curriculum they pick up there over there. And so that would be the same thing, right? Oh, you have a reading specialist because we believe reading specialists are important. You have a math specialist, those other things. If you have additional FTEs, then we can accommodate those. But at the same time, right, like math and reading are the top two priorities as far as moving and advancement in education. So I maybe somebody's like, I want a permanent substitute in lieu of a math specialist, right? Like, do you think that's like, I don't understand that would be an option for a principal to have from a leadership standpoint.
I would agree with you as well, and that's why I would turn rather closely to my partner here, Dr. Doozy, to say, hey, let's look at that data and why a principal would always consider that choice versus the other. That's a conversation. So there's certainly a collaborative atmosphere between our team and our principals.
Well, especially when we're talking about, these principals have relationships with these staff members, right? And so now you're putting in the principal's hands to then tell these people, hey, I'm picky over you, as opposed to just an analytical, this is why we're doing this. And now from here on, yeah, maybe, but these are the top priorities based on what we need to educate our children.
Yes, sir.
That's just my opinion.
Got it.
Those are my thoughts on that, at least from a choice standpoint. I do have a comment. Something that's been brought to my attention based on these numbers is that there might be schools who are losing positions or losing more positions than they had pre-COVID. Is that accurate? Is that a possibility that there might be schools that had, 6 before and now they're losing 9?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things impacting that. One, boundary changes. So there's different amounts of kids at schools that we're projecting. The other item is these are based on enrollment. And the reason we did that is because funding is based on enrollment. And one of the challenges we heard from the governing board was trying to make sure that our staffing standards aligned to a school model that could actually be financially supported. And prior to COVID and in prior staffing models that I've seen from Litchfield, it wasn't necessarily based on enrollment. It was, you're a K-5 school, so you get this. It was a K-8 school, so you get this. And when you have some K-5 schools, as example, that are going to have less than 500 kids, it's not generating the resources to support the same staffing as a school that has 1,000 kids. It also shouldn't have the same needs because you're servicing less than 500 kids versus 1,000 kids. And so I don't know directly that answer. I wasn't here prior to COVID, so I'd really have to dig into some old records to answer that directly. But that's the why of some of the changes you're seeing.
And then to board member Moran's point, are we just, is this the goal of this right now is just talk staffing? That's obviously we're talking staffing.
Yes.
Because we're not talking any other options about how to save money or how to, pull back. Obviously we have to balance the budget and we have less money to spend. So I'm assuming there's going to be other presentations on, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that to spend less money, or is staffing like the only option as far as pulling back from ESSER funds?
So about 90% of our M&O spending is staffing. And so I could cut every single dollar we spend outside of staffing and M&O and still not fully balance the budget. And so that's why we're focused on staffing. There certainly are other conversations we're having to try to save money. They're also more unpredictable. For example, we're currently looking at ways that we can take steps in the district to make our schools run more energy efficient. From what I've seen, though, that's highly likely to reduce the increased costs we see from APS and other providers increasing their rates, not so much actually saving much money. And that's when you look at our budget and you look at staffing and utilities, now you're at about 95% of M&O spending. And so there just isn't large dollar amounts outside of staffing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, to everybody that's watching, none of us wants to be having this conversation, but we knew it was coming the minute they told us we were gonna get all these ESSER funds, and we decided to invest it 100% in learning recovery. And we decided to hire more people and have more positions and more supports in place. And we did that knowing we would end up here probably because, to Board Member Moran's point, the legislature is what decides how much money we get as a school district. We don't get to make that decision. So this is a hard conversation because all of us up here know people in all these positions that we're talking about. And so it is personal to all of us too. And so I just want you guys to know that we care about everyone in this district. And none of the decisions that we end up making are going to be made lightly. And so we just hope that you guys are going to pay attention through all these conversations and know that none of us want to make these decisions, but we have to do what we have to do at the end of the day. I do have a question about reading specialists. We had reading specialists on all our campuses prior to COVID, right? And that's an option now. I'm having a hard time understanding how we can meet our legal requirements for reading if we don't have a reading specialist on every campus.
So one of the items that we've talked about but haven't really dug into is we're trying to also simplify our staffing standards in this way. And so we're trying to have one staffing standard that serves K5, 6-8, and K8. And so to answer your question, I wouldn't be surprised if every K5 school chooses to have a reading specialist because their data says at a K5 school they need one. But if you're at a middle school, I wouldn't be surprised if that same data says you need a math specialist. And so it still would be driven by the data, and that decision is still going to be vetted by the academic side of the district to make sure that we can service those needs. But we were trying to have a staffing standard that could be used across the district. And so to answer your question, I wouldn't at all be surprised if every K5 school has a reading specialist next year, because that's what the data says they need to use at least one of their choice FTE for.
Okay, so Ms. Benjamin, did you want to?
Yeah, to add to that, this was a conversation that at the admin cabinet level, we discussed several times, and it has been brought up multiple times. In January, the ARS 15-11 did change that it didn't have to be a reading specialist for our dyslexia designee. It could be a K3 teacher. However, knowing that meets that requirement, it does not necessarily mean that that's what's best for children. So we would be in compliance. But as Michael said, I would be very, very surprised if a campus did not choose to keep a reading specialist at the K5 level.
Okay, so the next thing is it's based on enrollment numbers, and I understand that we're trying to keep each school be able to fund themselves, but we do have some schools that have lower numbers than some of our higher number schools, and those kids need more things. Those kids are behind in reading and math, and now they might only get 2 FTEs for their school because their numbers are lower. So how are we actually helping the students get what they need?
So the thought would be if you're serving less kids, those resources can go further in part. So potentially you need a 0.5, I'm just going to make something up. Potentially you need a 0.5 math specialist and a 0.5 reading specialist. We're not saying these positions have to be created in full FTE. And so you might have a position at a school who that person is a full-time math specialist and is serving a population of 700 kids, or you could have a part-time one at a school with 500 kids and they're serving not dissimilar ratios of children.
Well, how do we think we're going to hire those people? How do we think we're going to get somebody that's going to want to come in and work part-time? Or are we going to split them between campuses? Just because every campus we've gone to and seen the math specialists and the reading specialists, we see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I don't know how we're going to get someone to be able to come in and do that part-time. And I know this is difficult. I'm just trying to.
Sure. The thought would be that schools that are close together geographically, if they needed or chose to have part-time people, would probably combine those into a full-time position. We're planning on having a discussion with all principals shortly after releasing what this would look like at each individual campus to facilitate some of those discussions around, okay, we might need a 0.5 here, you might need a 0.5 there. Can we make this work?
I know we haven't gotten there yet, but those campuses with less students are also going to get less of our classified staff as well, correct? So then our part-time math specialists will have less math aides to help with their kids, potentially, right? If they had math aides.
But they also have less kids to serve. Yes.
Okay. That's all my questions right now.
President
Can I ask one more thing? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Clymer. President Zion, I just wanted to also add that, one of the things that we're trying to do with this entire process is to have it make sense. And that from a smell and a look test, does it smell right? Does it look all right? And I know, as Mr. Owens asked about what other options do we have to save resources, we also have other funding scenarios to consider, whether it's the Title I budgets that come forward. We have a fund balance that we might be able to access. We have some other areas of revenue we might be able to look at to support those conversations at schools where those one-offs might need to exist. So please recognize that too. This process is new and we know that. But we want it to make sense as best possible, and we're working around people.
Okay. To be clear, I am not trying to question. I mean, you guys are the experts over there. We're looking to you for guidance as we move forward. I'm just trying to ask the questions that are getting asked of us and questions that we have in our minds so that we can explain. Because at the end of this, I want to make sure that people know that we have had all the conversations, we have dug into it, and we've really put all the time that needs to be into it before making decisions that are going to impact our staff and our students. Ms. Clymer.
I'll try and make this short. I'm having heartburn over this slide 9 where we have this choice of positions, but the positions don't seem to be equal to me. And the reason, I don't mean that one is more important or anything like that. What I mean is, if you have 3 student advisors and you go down to 2, or if you have 2 and you go down to 1, you still have someone doing that job, right? The instructional coach is a second instructional coach, and they also have an assistant principal, possibly. Permanent substitute, right? We can get a substitute, or we can split classes. I know that's terrible, but you can do it, right? You can make it work. I'm struggling with the math and reading specialists. It's pretty black and white. We either have them or we don't. And if we have a school that has 500 kids or, that's just below this, and they have 2 FTE, they're choosing like having something and not having something, not just reducing the staff that they have. And to President Zeideman's point, just because they have 500 kids and they have less kids that need math intervention doesn't mean they don't need it more than a school that has 1,000 kids. So, I know that's where the data piece comes in. I'm preaching to the choir. I know this. I know your faces are as sad as ours are. So I know that I'm saying all the things that you guys have had weeks and months to figure out. And I'm just now processing this and, in front of everybody. So I would say those 2, I'm having the hardest time with that being on this choice list, because I feel like it's all or nothing. Once there seems to be another option there, right? It would be harder, but there is still someone doing that job. But if they can't choose one of these for some reason, who then does the job? If you can't have a math specialist and you need one, who does it? That's actually not rhetorical. I just was there. Is there an actual answer to that or?
Ms. Clymer, I think what we would turn to is, I guess there's two things. One, and I haven't, I'm going to look at our principals out there. They're probably going to throw daggers at me, but our intent is that our principals are instructional leaders. So I know there's a lot to the principalship, but I would turn my conversation to them first and foremost. Hey, how are we meeting the needs of your campus? How are you doing that?
Yeah.
And how can we as a team support them? So that would be number one. But I also know you saw the transition to the instructional coach, whereas that used to be maybe we had them, maybe we didn't. Did we have the resources? We're saying now every school needs that coach.
Mm-hmm.
And our desire would be that that coach could support reading, math, science, spelling, you name it.
Okay.
And just be, be able to serve where needed. That's where I'd probably turn as well.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Did anybody else have questions, or we can move on to next section?
All right, we'll move on to our classified staffing. Similar to our approach with certified staffing, we took a look at our classified staff and determined what staff would be needed to safely open schools. This also aligns with our policy and tier 1 learning environment. All of our campuses continue to be allocated an office manager, a registrar, a nurse, classified specials instructors for K-5, K-8, EL aides based on the student enrollment of 35 or higher per campus, behavior technician, and crossing guards in alignment with ADOT standards. So next, we followed the same approach as with our certified tier 2 and tier 3 supports by providing all school leaders with choice options based on the student outcomes of the data. Campuses may receive up to 4.5 additional classified FTE to support that tier 2 and tier 3 learning environment. Again, this is based on the student enrollment numbers. What's being shown now are examples of these classified choice options. These are available for school leaders to select from using student outcomes and data to guide those decisions again as well. I will ask that Dr. Doozy and Mrs. Benjamin kind of go over the rationale for these.
All right, so again, we're faced with some very successful positions with our ESSER funding to help our students. So really to look at what is tier 1 universal that all schools need, and then what a campus may need given their particular community, the students that they serve. So the allocated staffing, just as mentioned, it's based on that tier 1 learning environment, what it needs to take, to run a school, essentially, not necessarily all the extra things that we would love to have. The allocated staffing of behavior technicians has also come up in discussion. And we wanted to provide a little bit of a rationale of our thoughts behind it. First of all, if you remember in the survey, our SAC, which is certified and classified staff members that represent each campus, this role specifically was the #1 role shared by them collectively having the most benefit on their campus. Another justification is, as we all know, we just approved new policy, 2 days suspension for kinder to 2nd grade students, up to 10 days. Behavior technicians will continue to run our care rooms so that we have that small family classroom, because we know when we have kiddos that are in crisis, that is an important location for students to be, to learn skills and to be ready to transition back to a classroom, to not be a disruption and to keep learning at their own level. Before they could ever qualify for any services or anything like that, because all those steps have to be in place first, right? We have to try different things, and those small family classrooms have a lot of impact. Another rationale for the behavior technicians also is for middle school, is to provide that place for students to go learn skills, especially after maybe making some choices that they shouldn't have made, to really rebuild those skills. So we're not only consequencing and disciplining, but we're also building skills that may be missed. And then lastly, the way that we're able to keep behavior technicians is a little different than the other positions. we are placing it in the classroom site fund. And as much as the principals have really kind of expressed they wanted a little more flexibility with this role, it's one of those things in the classroom site fund that we have to be consistent that we're using it for a certain staff role. So it presents its own challenges. It's not impossible, but it moves away from our efforts to standardize our staffing model. So those are some justifications of why you still see behavior techs. And then the classified choice decisions again reflect that tier 2, tier 3 needs for the campuses based on what the campus needs are, based on how the students are doing and those decisions that principals will make.
Do you want questions now? Okay.
Yes, members of the board, do you have any questions?
Ms. Clymer?
Absolutely.
I think most of the questions are similar here, so I don't think I have anything specific, except for I just wanted to touch on the behavior technician and sort of understanding how that fits into the allocated choices. If I'm just trying to create an example so that you kind of understand what my thinking is. If you had a school that, now they have a behavior technician that is given to them, but one of the choice options was to have the behavior coach. If they preferred the behavior coach over the technician, is that a possibility to make that swap, or because of the funding source, they can't do that? Would they be able to make an additional classified choice, or is that not an option?
So a couple of things about that. One of the reasons I structured this to separate the behavior techs out into a different funding source, there was a couple of reasons for that. One, they're on a different salary schedule. And so giving an option of a behavior tech versus other aides that are on a different salary schedule, it was a really large difference in cost. Two, interestingly enough, the cost of the behavior tech district-wide is very, very similar to the cost of what we currently support positions out of classroom site funds. So very easy swap, if you will, from a financial perspective. Being able to convert classified positions to certified positions would be a very difficult task, just because of the different levels of costs to try to make that consistent. One behavior technician certainly wouldn't equal, I don't even think, a half of a behavior coach.
Right.
And so I don't know that would really end up working out in practice.
Okay, I understand financially. I think just in a real world scenario, I think a principal is going to have a hard time keeping a behavior coach when they have a behavior tech and they can't not have that person, and they only have 2 FTE. So they're doubling up in one area, but they're losing out on something else. So it feels like by doing this model, we're making that choice for them, because I think it's hard. It would be hard for them to say, I need 2 similar positions. And I'm not saying their job descriptions aren't different. I understand that they are, but I mean, they are similar enough. So as a principal, I would look to say, I'd be hard pressed to keep a behavior coach when I have someone else that's already allocated and classified. So that just gives me a little heartburn over the behavior coach position, because I don't want those not to be selected, because they do a different job.
Yeah.
But with the hard choices that are in front of people, that might not be what a lot of people choose. Dr. Juicy, I see you nodding. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. That wasn't a question. I was just thinking out loud. I apologize.
Ms. Moran?
My only question is on the classified choice options. So we are giving options that range from 3 to 4.5 FTE. What is the current range? If you were to look at the campuses today and these positions, what would our current range be approximately?
So the way our classified staffing is currently set up, it's actually in 2, now that I think about it, it's in 2 kind of actually similar buckets, in the sense of there's classified staffing that schools are just allocated. And then they also receive an allocation of, it really is FTE, but for sake of making it easier for principals to manage and think about, we call them aid hours. And so 8 hours presently are calculated on an individual student level. And what I mean by that is every individual student generates additional 8 hours. And so there is a wide variety amongst our campuses of what that number is, whereas this model makes it more consistent in those same enrollment spans. But let me pull up the classified staffing document so we can just talk about it for a second. So presently, they get those same positions in terms of office manager, nurse, registrar, crossing guards. They also receive intervention aides out of Classroom Site Fund. Those are the ones I was previously referencing. They receive reading aids, and then we have the grade level aids that we recently added.
Okay, so if you had to guess a range, would it be 5 to 7? Would it be 7 to 12?
So the reason the 8 hours makes that really difficult to answer is the reason we break it into 8 hours is so principals can even have choice on how they structure those positions. And so one principal might choose to have a 7-hour position with benefits. And when they make that choice, we actually deduct from their 8 hours the cost of giving those benefits. Or they could choose to have, for example, 5.5-hour aides that don't get benefits. And so you can have many more 5.5-hour aides than you can have full-time positions. And so it really just, even under the current model, it depends on the decisions that principal made when doing the staffing.
Okay.
But I can give very specific ranges in a Friday update.
Okay, I appreciate that because I'm just wondering, although I understand there's a difference between 5.5 hours in a day and 7 hours in a day, everyone has hours that are more productive than others. So I'm trying to understand the real impact of losing these support positions because we know how important these are. We know that we have more classroom support than other districts, and that is one of our strongest assets.
Right.
We also know that the classroom support people make less money than our certified people. So we can have more of them for, more positions in the classified versus certified if we're talking about budgetary overall. So again, that would be a question I would have is,
That is
do we have any trade-offs?
Yeah, that is something that we looked at when we were developing the numbers of FTEs, for example. But it really is all one pot. And so if we were, what we're talking about is moving funding from certified staffing to classified staffing, which we could explore. But when we're talking about only giving the 2 to 4 FTE of option in the certified space, that's pretty much why we landed where we landed, is we didn't want to be cutting certified any more than we were already recommending.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
I have some questions similar to board member Clymer's, or just at least the same topic of the behavior coach and then the behavior technician. Care rooms on campus. Who facilitates those? Who's responsible for those?
Currently, our behavior coaches oversee those care rooms, and then they have the behavior technician as a support system in there. Through that, they will work with any of the kids who are maybe in crisis on campus. And then they would also have skill groups based on whatever the kids' needs are, if there was something that came up. And so the behavior technician may be running those skill groups. Some campuses use it kind of as an in-school suspension, and they build in skill groups throughout the day to help rebuild some of those skills before kids go back to the classroom.
Yeah, thanks. Because on visits, I've gone to campuses where there's one person in there, there's two people. Some of them I've seen 3 staff members in a care room at a given time. And so I'm just trying to understand the need for both, or, because we're talking bodies, right? And so I've been in care rooms where people have, the person, whether it be the technician or the coach, right? And said, yeah, we see 56 kids a week, right? And I'm like, okay, right? All those kids need help. They need that time. But at the same time, does it take 2? Or is there alternatives? Because, the care rooms are something that's new to this world that we live in now. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying as we, as things change and whatever, new things come out. And so, but when you put that up against a reading specialist or a math specialist or another aide in the classroom that's focusing on education, looking at, okay, for certified staffing, the behavior coach is optional, but then for classified, the behavior technician is required, right? So I think we need to require one, maybe. And again, I don't love the option thing personally. I don't love the option thing from a holistic viewpoint of where we want all of our campuses to be, with a focus and emphasis on education and making sure that reading and math are a priority. I don't understand. We already talked about, we'd be surprised if every K through 5 didn't have a reading specialist. Okay. And statistically speaking, every K through 5 should have a reading specialist, and middle school should have a math specialist, and K through 8 should probably have one of each. Right. And so that's what I'm talking about from a big picture district level decision that needs to go down. And then if there are additional FTEs available to those campuses based on population or whatever it is, or need at that school, then we can have some wiggle room. But again, the difference, the way that these campuses would look so different, I think doesn't make sense to me when we know what needs to be a priority district wide. So that's where I'm just getting hung up on this. Okay, well, this principal really wants to prioritize this. Well, do we want to leave it up? No offense. I mean, do we want to leave it up to that principal when we know holistically, statistically speaking, they should have this? So are we going to overrule the principal when they choose something that they're allowed to choose? Right. And then again, what's it going to look like next year? Oh man, we really should have a math specialist this year instead of the other FT. Hey, sorry, you did a year. We're swapping you out. That's kind of the way I see it. So I think we should have a this is what you get, and this is what we have for some wiggle room, but not a here's a menu.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I just want to see if
I don't answer questions.
So it sounds like, at least what I'm hearing, that it's really the math and reading specialists that potentially you don't want choice on, but if there's additional above that, maybe you're okay with the choice. Am I following along correctly, or did I miss the point?
Well, I think those are the top 2. Absolutely. But I think, what other impact we have, the principals have given their input. Maybe there's additional input. We can put, hey, rank these and say, if you had 5 FTEs, which ones are you picking? If you have 4, which ones are you picking? And you know, and then you can say, okay, let's notice a pattern. But at the same time, no school's going to get less than 2, right? So math and reading are the top 2. Does anybody disagree?
Not disagreeing. I wanted to ask for some clarification. We have 8 elementary and middle schools that do not have math specialists right now because we've done it by data. So across the campuses, that might not even be something that is on their campuses right now with math specialists. So just kind of wanting to get your ideas of what would that look like? Are we now adding it to those campuses? They haven't had them this entire time.
Why don't they need a math specialist? They're just their scores are that high. They don't have enough kids to need.
It was a decision that was made at the admin cabinet and the board level a few years ago to use data to drive where math specialists would be placed.
So yes, it's based on their scores. The schools that have students performing higher, the resources were allocated to, again, bridge that gap, because this ESSER funds we're talking about, and they were allocated to the schools that were performing lower in math because ESSER was finite or is finite versus reading specialists were across all K-5 campuses.
So then maybe I'm wrong.
Can I ask, did we have math specialists? Because I just don't remember on our middle schools prior to COVID, because we did have reading specialists on all our elementary campuses. Did we have math specialists there prior to this, or is that they came with COVID funds?
Maybe. The only math specialists that were in positions in our district were if they used it for title funds. So maybe.
Okay. But it wasn't some, okay. So
But it really
right?
became a position across the board with S.
That's right. Okay.
Yes.
President Zeidman, real quick, and Mr. Owens, bottom line, you are correct. Our goal is to establish the foundations for our kids' future, prepare them to get into high school. They got to be able to read. They got to be able to do math. They have to be able to socialize appropriately. So I think we're just trying to utilize those resources in front of us. But from establishing a baseline for every campus, we understand where you're at. We'll continue to look at that and see how we can continue the process. But
I'm just letting you my personal opinion.
For sure.
Like I'm one of 4 up here, and I'm obviously not an expert in all of this because there's a history that I don't know about. Thank you for educating me on that. But oh, hey, we don't have a math specialist. Okay, well, maybe now that school's math scores decrease or they don't grow like the other campuses. And it's like, whoa, well, we should have had one, right? The flip-flopping that was mentioned earlier, or the idea that you pick something else over a math and a reading, like, I don't know. To me, it doesn't pass the smell test of what's a priority.
And I think that goes into what we talked a little bit about earlier, which is you, Dr. Doozy, Dr. Davidson, Executive Director Benjamin, will be involved with the principals. Since this is a new process, you'll be involved and you'll be helping to coach them with how to make these decisions and make sure that we don't have favoritism or any of those factors coming into play, and make sure that we actually are ensuring that those campuses and those students have what they need based on these options. Is that
is
correct?
absolutely our intent. Yes.
Okay, so I have another question, kind of links to all of these things, is the consistency piece of we hire people at our campuses to be a math specialist or reading specialist. That's because they've specialized in those positions. Are we going to see this changing every year? Are principals going to be able to be like, oh, I've changed my mind. Next year I want something different? Because that's just challenging for us. I just want to know if that's what the plan is for that.
We haven't described how many years we haven't, admin cabinet has not given direction to principals to say, this is your decision for X amount of years. But best practice would be to know if a position is bringing you the success, you would need it more than a year. So to answer your question, yes, it's important that we define the commitment of the staffing that they're adding, but I do not have an exact year because we haven't gotten there yet. So I will mention and I'm really processing through what's being shared. And like, I think about the middle school with student advisors, to have a student advisor at the middle school level, a principal may want to pick a student advisor over a math specialist and a reading specialist. If discipline, behavior expectations, I mean, we just received a lot of feedback from our families, our employees, that discipline should be a focus. And so if that particular school has a high incident of discipline and interventions that are being done for students behaviorally, then they may very well pick a student advisor over a math specialist, because students have to behave and classes have to be managed for students to be able to learn. So this is just one example, of many that why we thought the choice based on data. And the last comment I'll make just to what you were speaking about is we really made sure with principals, and I've had to stop and have us all reflect together, that this is not about the person in the role. This is about the role. What service are they providing to your students? So we do have to keep circling back to that, because it's very easy to get personal about the person in that role. And I understand it. As principals, they love their staff. So I understand it. And so do we. So,
Well, when you talk about the role, for instance, our behavior tech, we're going to keep that at every campus, but not a behavior coach. So basically, the role of behavior coach is going to be moved to the behavior tech. I don't see any other way to get around that.
or the instructional coach and instructional leader, the principal of the school, will help guide and shape and support that behavior tech, is the other idea of that. Because really our instructional coaches' roles are all aspects of what takes to be a good instructor, a good educator. And part of that is behavior management. So I see it as a team effort. If they chose not to have a behavior coach, I see it as the principal would be assisting, the instructional coach would be assisting. It wouldn't be the behavior technician is taking on the exact role of a certified staff. I think that would be a difficult expectation.
Okay.
Can
That's
I ask
all.
a quick thing?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So a behavior coach and a student advisor, can you explain maybe the differences between the two, right? Because it sounds like there's some overlap as far as behavioral discipline, redirection, right? Can you explain that for me, please?
Yes. So student, and this is history, right? Honoring the past, embracing our future. Prime example. They are two separate job descriptions. Student advisors was actually a role that was developed first at the middle school. And the thought was that these students would have a person throughout their middle school experience that they would have a connection with. Student advisor in 6th grade would move up with the 7th grade, move up with the 8th grade, and their assistance with the kiddos is for behaviors, for intervention, for getting them resources, and also being a disciplinarian at the middle school level. So that's a student advisor. If I could summarize the job description, that's basically it. A behavior coach is very similar to a student advisor, but more tailored to K-5. So again, they're connected with the kids. They help teachers with students with behavior plans in the classroom. And then also they act as a disciplinarian.
So, but you just said a K or a middle school might want a student advisor also instead of a reading specialist or a math specialist. So they would have a behavior and a student advisor.
If you are a middle school, behavior coaches are a K-5 model. Student advisors are the 6-8 version.
Okay.
Similar roles, two different titles. There is talk that we've discussed to merging those roles and coming up with one title with one job description to more clearly define, because they were created at two different time frames.
Yeah, I remember I had a academic advisor in high school, right? So it's similar, but a little bit more of the discipline, but there's no overlap as far as on campus.
K-8s would be the only overlap, is that they may choose to have a student advisor for their middle school kiddos and a behavior coach for their little people.
Okay. Thank you.
Did anybody have any more questions?
I think though, the one thing I'd clarify is that a K-8 could have a behavior coach that supports K-8 students. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next section.
Now we'll chat through the remainder of the timeline for budget approval for fiscal year 2025. This is an update from what was presented in November. On February 13th, we'll be bringing forward compensation study results and analysis and needs assessment of other parts of the district, including special education. On February 27th, we'll be bringing the projected budget for fiscal year 2025, which will show estimates of revenue for next year, anticipated spending for next year, considering all recommended changes, including recommended raises. On February 28th, we will be releasing contracts to our employees for next year, due back at the end of March. At the March 5th meeting, we'll be bringing the projected budget for actual approval. This timeline is in response to employee feedback that they would like to know what their raise will be prior to signing their contract for next year. And this timeline will provide employees that opportunity. But it is a more condensed timeline than we've done in the past to accommodate that request. This time, the whole team is available to answer any additional questions that we have based on the conversation tonight.
Ms. Clymer.
I think two final thoughts. One thought, one question. Were there any changes to White Tank's staffing? We didn't discuss that, or they weren't called out specifically. So are there any significant changes to that school specifically, just because they don't necessarily fall into the model like K-5 or K-8?
No.
There'll be no staffing changes at White Tanks.
Unless there's something in the sped items we'll be bring forward at a future date that I'm not aware of.
Okay,
No.
but as you see it right now,
No.
they'll just continue as they were. Okay, I just want to make sure there was anything in here, so I didn't want to assume. The second thing is with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, I know they were involved in this process and trying to bring back feedback from their own campuses. I am listening to Board Member Owen's concern about the decision-making process for principals and how tough that's going to be. And I don't disagree with that. I know it's going to be tough. What was the feedback from the Superintendent's Council or Advisory Committee, excuse me, whatever it's called, in terms of where the decision is made, right? Whether it's made at the principal level, whether it's made at the admin level, the board level, whatever. I mean, we don't need to get in the weeds of that, but I'm just saying, I am under the thought that, you know, to the point earlier, principals are the leader on campus. They should be the instructional leader on campus. So they're in the best position to make this decision based on what they know, their campus culture, what their students and families need and want, and what their, you know, specific budget allows. So I think we hire professionals to do their job, and we should allow them to make those choices until they no longer work, right? Something happens, it needs to change. But I received a lot of emails in the last, you know, several days with absolutely legitimate concerns, right? About we're no longer going to have a math specialist. Our school is not going to have a reading specialist. And so I guess I'm just thinking, what is the staff's perspective on that decision-making? Because what I'm hearing is that the decision-making is actually happening at the campus level. It's not happening up here. I mean, if you only have money for 5 positions, we're just deciding which ones you get to choose from, basically. We're not really deciding which ones on the campus. So does the staff want the decision to rest at the campus level, or does the staff want the decision to rest at the admin level?
Ms. Clymer and Madam President, we did not ask that directly of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. It happens to be so that I meet with them tomorrow so I can further the conversation with them regarding this process. I think the original commentary was, hey, We want to establish boundaries, guardrails as it relates to the number. Please give us feedback on the types that you see that would serve as a foundation and then supplementary in nature. That's where we started.
Yeah. I mean, it's not important to know. I'm sure every campus might feel differently about it, but I'm just thinking that, I think to the point earlier, the principal is the one that's on the campus that's working there, that should know the data better than anybody. And so I think, we have to do it all the same. We either have to let every principal make their decision, or we have to, make the decision for everybody. And so I think if there's hesitation about whether they can make that decision or whether they should make that decision, we should just at least explore that before we make this choice. I'm of the mindset that they should be making it, but I do understand that there's opposing viewpoints to that. So I think that's one of the most important things to decide before we kind of, further this process. But anyway, thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I would just say that historically, I have been in opposition to more choices, campus by campus, because we have a lot of variation, and it seemed as though different students at different schools were getting a different education. But we have come a long way from where we used to be. And I do understand, based on this presentation and the additional information and discussion that we've had tonight, that we do have different needs on different campuses, and who better to make that decision, those detailed decisions. If we can't have it all, who better to make those decisions than the principals, who know their staff, they know their scores, they know their students, and they know the variations that they have on their campuses. So I'm okay with this model, knowing that, we might come back and say, no, across the board, we're going to find some money, or let's say that we get more money. Let's say that I think Prop 123, there's some things on the table with increasing that. Let's say somehow we get more money, then maybe we have the opportunity to come back and say, yes, we want to mandate that every middle school gets a math specialist, every K-5 gets a reading specialist, and we can do that. But for now, I am in favor of choice, as long as it is guided and it is based on the data that's available.
Mr. Owens.
Just two quick things. So, just looking back real quick, obviously the ESSER funds are going away. The override that we passed a couple years ago, that just kept us at the same funding, right? So the ESSER override here, ESSER up.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I made my points. Honestly, lots of times I ask questions because I don't know the answers, but also because I think it's useful and helpful, because some of these are same people have the same questions, right? I'm not challenging. I'm just education, informing me. Honestly, this is best case scenario from a school board standpoint, because I can say, I didn't fire anybody. I didn't choose anybody. Your principal did. And I don't know if I love that. I mean, I'm not trying to get reelected yet, but I just want to make sure that, it's not like, in 2 years, we're looking back and being like, oh, that campus got it wrong because they chose the wrong, position. And now that's 2 years of those children's education impacted. Right. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen. I don't see that, but there might be one outlier, but, my focus and emphasis is on reading and math and education. And so those two positions stand out to me. And, if a school statistically doesn't need a math specialist because they're performing that well, maybe, those teachers and those grade levels have got it dialed in, then great. But, if you start seeing those numbers decrease and all of a sudden they're struggling and suffering, okay, now we've got to pivot. And now that teacher who, didn't want to lose their position 2 years ago or a year ago and was like, sweet, I'm safe. Just like the redistricting, right? Like this is a difficult situation. People will be impacted, educators will be impacted. And unfortunately, we just need to try to soften the blow as much as possible. And I can't remember, how do you put it? What is it? minimize disruption, right? That's the goal in all of these decisions that we make. And so, I trust in our administration. I trust in our principals to make the right decisions that are best for the students. And so, this is what we're going to go forward with. Then I hope it works out well.
I echo what everybody's saying up here, right? None of us want to be here. None of us want to be making these decisions, but here we are because again, our legislature doesn't feel like they should fund us as well as they should. So we are just doing the best we can with the money that we have. And we appreciate everyone that has written us and contacted us through various means to share their thoughts with us. Please know that we are reading all those things. We are taking all that into consideration, and we're going to be up here to make a really hard decision. And I'm sorry to the principals. They're going to probably end up making the hardest of decisions. I'm very sorry that you guys have to deal with that, but I just appreciate all our staff and trying to find some understanding with what we're doing up here, that none of us wants to change our staffing models, but it's kind of where we're at. And I just thank everybody for all the time they put in and the feedback you've gotten. And I hope that we keep looking into that feedback and as long as we keep sticking with the data, I think that's the best thing we have going for us, is that we're going to use data to make our decisions. And that takes it out of being personal. So, but thank you guys very much for all the time you put into this.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions about that, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the aggregate performance classifications of principals and teachers.
All right, so thank you, President Zaidema and governing board members. This is Dr. Doozy here. As policy provides the expectation that each year we give the board an aggregate performance classification of both our principals from last year and our teachers. So we have provided that information for you tonight, and I'll open up to any questions that you may have.
Ms. Clymer?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
Believe it or not, I don't have any questions either. I don't like this model. I have never liked this model. I feel like the highly effective rating is too lenient because you can still be highly effective and essentially get a 70-something%. I don't know what we can do about that, but I would love to see something different next year if that's possible.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thanks.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you guys for giving us this information. And
Thank you.
I lied. I do have a question. The way these numbers are figured out, who determines like how the rankings go? That's what my question is.
Sure, that is predetermined by the teacher observations. They get so many points for each domain, and then they also get growth coefficient data based on how the school performs by grade level in reading and math, and then also their school ranking last year. So it's all point valued for each of those elements that is calculated into a full amount of scores, and then that puts them in the categories that they earned based on the current point system that's attached to our evaluation. And the principals is the same way. Their domains are each scored at a certain value. They have growth coefficients for reading and math based on our district benchmark data, and then their school rating.
Okay, understand that. But we have to report this to the state, this information, right? So
Yes,
I get how our teachers get their points that they get, but who determined what the cutoff points are to be highly effective, developing, ineffective?
Great question. Those points were honoring the past. Those were determined in the past, and we are implementing the current system that has been in place.
Okay, so we decided that at some point as a
At
district.
some point in the history of Litchfield, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. So thank you very much.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes.
So since we determined this, we can change this if we deem so necessary.
Yes.
Is this on the list of things that we're looking at? I know we're looking at the different instruments, but does that play into this?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Okay.
I trust you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We are going to move on to reports. Our first report will be from Dr. Davidson.
All right. Thank you, President Zaidema, members of the board, community staff that are still remaining. Certainly, it's been a busy month of January, lots to report on, so I'll try to make it fast, but I wanted to start with the words right behind our governing board says "You matter." And I just wanted to highlight our governing board members for your work, your dedication to this community. It is the month for celebrating our board members, a National School Board Member Appreciation Month. So on behalf of our team and those that you serve, thank you. With that said, some other items, we continue to work towards our safety and well-being on our campuses, where the Centegix initiative remains strong. We're moving forward with that. Training will be coming to our schools soon, and we look forward to working alongside our team to standardize the entryways to our offices with cameras and doorbells and door locks, things like that, making it a little bit better, stronger, and standardized. We've been out visiting schools. Thank you for those of you that are attending our governing board showcases. We were at Verado Middle School today with a pie tour and had just a great opportunity to visit with the staff and visit our classrooms, see our 6-8 learners doing just some quality work in the classrooms. Wanted to let our board and team know that we did dust off our Future Leader Academy. We had 20 participants come for the first time just this past week, classified and certified staff who are just interested in growing their leadership capacity, not necessarily saying, I want to be a principal. We just want to become better leaders. So that was a great opportunity for our team to be a part of that process. February 12th, some of our team members will be engaging with School Connect. And if you're familiar with them, with Love Our Schools Day, one of my goals in our community relations department as well is just simply to ensure that we have quality community partners, those that want to engage with us. And the work with School Connect will help us continue down that pathway. We spoke in our last meeting around an opening governing board seat. I just wanted to let you all know in our community, we do have 7 individuals that have put in for interest in serving alongside you 4. One of them, however, was not a community member. So just making certain you know that. So we have 6 officially to date that Superintendent Watson's office will get their information and we'll let him move through that process. And lastly, and you guys are very much aware, I think Ms. Moran spoke to Prop 123. The legislature is in full effect, and I just wanted to give some information out to you all. Monday, January 29th, which was just a couple of days ago, that was the last opportunity for bills to be introduced in the Senate. February 5th is the deadline for the House. And by February 16th, that'll be the last day where a bill can be heard in any of the chamber's committees. Right now, just in kind of a general summation, there's over 30 bills that are coming forward that relate to the educational environment. And they're all over the place, from how we do surveys, what kind of courses we offer to our students. Can you serve on a board and have a criminal background? I mean, there you name it, we could sit here and talk about it. I think the one that I'm curious about and see how it'll come forward is one that really starts to look at revisions in Title 15, which is, the Arizona Revised Statute piece tied to education. So there's a variety of things that could come from that. We'll see how that plays out. But in our board updates, I'll do my best to provide you some information on bills that we see moving forward, such as the Purple Star School Bill. We know that right now has actually come out of the particular committee, and actually I think should be going to a vote here real soon by both sides, Senate and House. And we are very interested in that bill becoming law. As you know, Arizona is one of 6 states that still does not have legislation to support military families and their children, as well as highly mobile students. So we're excited to be a part of that initial process. With that said, again, thank you for all that you do, and I'll be quiet now. Thanks.
Okay, we will move on to reports from the governing board. Start with Ms. Clymer.
Sure. I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight, so just bear with me, please. I had to write it down because I would forget it. So in lieu of my traditional governing board report that discusses activities that I've done over the last month or so, I want to take this time to address the recent change to our board. As of January 8th, board member Honak resigned from our board. This brings a range of emotion, as I feel is important to share with my fellow governing board members, district administration, and the community. For the past 8 years, I have committed myself to this governing board in the service of students. This volunteer job, as we've already heard tonight, can be time-consuming, emotionally exhausting, and stressful at times, but should leave us feeling rewarded and grateful for the opportunities we are able to create for students and families in this community. Instead, for the past 3 years, my board service has been filled with worry, anxiety, and fear of retribution from a man that was elected to do the same job as each of us here. I have been called named shameful, incompetent, idiot, liar, cheat, child abuser, and criminal, just to name a few. I have been screamed at and my words misrepresented, all from this very stage. We have all been lied to, provided misinformation time and time again, and have been gaslit from this very stage. And I, for one, am grateful that I can attend this meeting tonight without fear or worry of a fellow board member actively working against this district and the people who have dedicated their lives to making this an A+ school district. When I took this job all those years ago, I committed to being professional, to treat others with respect. I committed to being honest and working to provide fair governance to this district in the service of all of its students. In my opinion, I can now get back to my work without fear of constant disruption, unprofessional behavior, and harassment. This situation reminds me of a quote from Potter Stewart, who's a former Supreme Court justice. Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have the right to do and what is right to do. This district has always been greater than the sum of its parts, and this board can now get back to working together for a common goal instead of to forward a personal agenda. 2024 is a new year and a great opportunity to start anew. I am proud of the work our district has done in the face of sometimes insurmountable odds, and I'm excited for what this new year will bring. Thank you to my remaining fellow board members for showing up and doing this difficult job every day. I'm grateful to serve alongside all of you. I look forward to our new board appointment and remind the people of this district to be careful who you vote for. It really does matter. Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
We haven't done board reports for about 6 weeks, so I am going to revisit a couple of the events that I was able to go to. I went to the Kiwanis Special Ed Seasonal Holiday Celebration in December, which is one of my favorite events of the year because the pure joy on the students' faces is just magic and contagious, and it is one of the things that makes this job, volunteer job, worth it. So thank you to Kiwanis for supporting our LESD students. I also was able to attend the Wigwam Creek and Barbara Ruby School showcases. Thank you to Principal Tassin and Principal Costa for your hospitality. We have amazing campus leaders in our district, and for that, I am also grateful. I'm also thankful to the students that we've met this year on our school showcases. These students are very impressive. They come into an intimidating room with a bunch of governing board members and speak to us intelligently and coherently, and it just is amazing. So I can assure you that the future looks bright with these young people on the rise. I also was able to attend the spelling bee, the district spelling bee that we had, which is such a fun event, although it's nerve-wracking for me as a spectator. So I can only imagine the students that are in this spelling bee, what they must be feeling. Again, I'm very impressed with the knowledge of our students, and I always learn the definitions and spellings of new words myself during this district event. So I appreciate that. The last recent event I'd like to address is this meeting. I have attended all meetings virtually for the past year. So let me tell you that it is so incredibly nice to be back up here. So what changed? Why am I back? As many of you have seen on YouTube, I was personally harassed by my former fellow board member, Mr. Honak, in January and March of 2022 with physical intimidation, in my opinion, verbal abuse, screamed at and called names right here on this stage. Since our March 2022 meeting, I have not felt safe, physically emotionally, or mentally safe to be in the vicinity of Board Member Honak. Based on his actions in January and March of 2022, I sought and successfully received an injunction against harassment that provided 1 year of protection and physical separation from Mr. Honak, as he was barred by court order from attending governing board meetings in person. I am grateful to our justice system for providing this protection that withstood additional filings and appeal by Board Member Honak. When the injunction against harassment expired in early 2023 after 1 year, and Mr. Honak was allowed to return in person, the mere thought of being in the same room with him brought on a physical reaction, a fight or flight response in my body. And as I speak about him tonight, I am getting a high heart rate alert on my Garmin device, which has happened repeatedly when I heard him speak. My instinct, that still small voice that women are often taught to ignore, to be nice, was screaming at me to keep myself safe and distant. I am glad I listened, took control of the situation, and decided to attend all meetings virtually as long as Mr. Honak was present. I am happy to report that I was able to successfully complete all of my duties as an elected official during the past year without issue. I am proud to have set an example to my children and anyone else who may face harassment to utilize our justice system, not hesitate to seek protection, and follow your instincts. I am so happy to be back, and I look forward to welcoming a new appointed board member in the coming months and the additional board member changes that will come with the November election. So I will close with lyrics to the classic by Elton John, "I'm Still Standing." Don't you know I'm still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. I'm still standing. Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
I don't really have anything to report. Not much to report. I just wanted to, really stress and emphasize that, whether it's emails or whether it's public comment, right? Like, we hear you and we understand that the decisions we make, decisions I make, the questions I ask, they're all because I want to make sure that we make the best decision for the students, for the staff. You all make sacrifices as parents, as teachers, as administrators, and that's not taken lightly at all. And so, if it comes to boundary issues, and we talked about that from the very beginning, we knew that when we made a decision, certain children, certain families were going to be impacted regardless of what decision we made, right? The first meeting we had, it was a packed house. The second meeting, packed house again, all with comments and stuff and it was all different issues, right? I want to keep my K8. I want my K5 to become a full elementary, or there's no winning right there. But at the same time, we have to look at the big picture, and that's unfortunately what we're having to do with the whole budget too. We have money that's going away, and so positions unfortunately aren't going to be there, and that's why I want to make sure, and I'm confident in this administration, that they're going to do that, and that they're going to look at every every avenue or every situation to make sure that the priority is our children's education. And while every single one of you teachers matter, we have to look at the biggest impact on children and their education. And so I just want to just emphasize and reiterate that your words and all that aren't lost on us. And I do look forward also to having a fifth board member who can contribute to the board, who wants to be proactive and who wants to lift LESD up instead of tear it down. And so I hope if anybody hasn't applied yet that's still considering applying, there's time. And then I hope Superintendent Watson really looks at the candidates and finds the person who he thinks will fit best for this board and what we need moving forward. And with that, I hope everybody has, yeah, bye.
Okay. So I've been thinking about what I would say at this board meeting for probably the last 3 years. And the more I thought about it and it became a reality that we were going to have a board meeting where we could give a board report and not have that fear and anxiety and stress hanging over our heads, the more I decided I don't want to focus on that anymore. I'm excited for what's coming ahead for us. I'm excited that we have this opening on our board. And I'm excited at the people that are saying they're interested in applying and have already turned in applications. I feel like no matter who Superintendent Watson picks, we're going to be in great hands. Our board is going to be in great shape, and we're going to be able to move forward and make some real progress in this district. So I'm not going to dwell on the past and the bad things that have happened because we're not there anymore, and we get to move forward, and things are looking much brighter and better every day, even though, yes, we have some hard decisions coming up, but I feel like we can make those because we have weathered storms in the past and we've made it through, and we're where we are today. So nothing is going to stop us from being able to move forward and make positive impacts on our children. That being said, I would like to talk about a lot of great things that have been happening in our district. I was able to attend the Kiwanis Christmas party as well with board member Moran. This is a great event that Kiwanis puts on for our students that are in the self-contained programs, for them to have a Christmas celebration, get to spend time with Santa, get to open a present in an environment that is safe and comfortable for them. So I really appreciate our partnership we have with Kiwanis and that they do this for our students every year. In the same vein, I got to go to the Holiday Express fundraiser event that was put on by Hacienda Del Rey Assisted Living Home for Wigwam Creek Middle School. This is something they've been putting on for several years now. They have a great partnership with that school and Hacienda Del Rey Assisted Living Home. Their students from NJHS and student council and things like that get to go over and do activities with the seniors that live over in that community. That community does a fundraiser where they have different businesses and vendors come in and donate a bike or a scooter or something like that. And people come in and buy raffle tickets, and all the money that's raised from that all goes back to Wigwam Creek Middle School, which is great because that's a school, one of our Title I schools that has had trouble in fundraising in the past. So it's a great way for them to earn some money. And 4th year in a row, we won again from a raffle. So this year my kid got to have a light up scooter, which was super exciting for them. We also had the boundaries special meeting. We've had several meetings about the boundaries, and what I liked to see over all the time was how we had a ton of people because people were really upset. And then slowly they stopped coming to where we finally were voting on the boundaries and no one showed up to the meeting. And so I feel like the district did the best they could with sharing information out to everybody. And to the parents that are infected now and are just now realizing the changes that are happening, I'm sorry that you feel like the information wasn't there. And I hope that over time, when our administration is able to come out and meet with those groups and get to talk to them and be able to share, once we have a principal in place, here's who your principal is going to be, here's what you get to be a part of. I'm excited to see what that's going to be for those parents that are upset right now, because I know that once they get in and get to be part of that process, they're going to see it's a great, great experience that they're going to get to have and that their families get to be part of from the ground up. We also did the superintendent mid-year review, which was a great chance for us as a board to sit down with Dr. Davidson. He's halfway through his first year here. How's it going? Get his feedback, give us able to share feedback with him. I feel so positive about the changes that are happening in this district, and that's to your leadership that you've brought here. So I'm really grateful to us as a board for being able to pick the best person for this job. We had our last meeting because normally would have done board reports. There was a mix up. So this is why we're doing board reports in this meeting this time, where I was selected by my fellow board members to be board president again. And I just want to thank all of you for that trust that you put in me. I love doing this job, actually being a board member. And I think that this year is going to be our best year yet. So I'm very excited to see what progress we get to make going forward. The school showcases, thank you to the principals that put those on for us and let us get to tour the schools. A special comment to Principal Acosta, I really appreciate the fact that you are listening to our board meetings and hearing what matters to us as board members, and then you incorporated all of that into what you showed us on your campus. That really made me, as a board member, feel valued and that you cared to show us the things that matter to us. And then also for Principal Tassin, the students that came and talked to us, I love hearing from our students, but those students, by far the best students we've had because they were so honest with us. It was a group of students that gave us the most honest, real feedback. They told us what they liked, but what they didn't like. They took ownership of how some of what they didn't like was because they were not taking it seriously as students. So it was just really a really amazing conversation with those students that was just one of my favorite ones we've had so far. As far as the board vacancy, that's the last thing obviously we're dealing with right now. The applications are open until 4 p.m. on Friday this week. So if you haven't applied, please do so. It is not a cumbersome application. You can go through the district website and get the information and get the application in. Like I said, I'm very excited for all of the people that have put their names on there besides the one that's not from our district, because that's just funny. But the rest of them, any of them will be great options for us. So I'm very excited to see that. Lastly, we are going to have 3 open positions on this board for the election this year in November. So if you are interested in being on the board, you can, like myself, file your statement of interest with the Maricopa County Elections Office and with Steve Watson's office as well, so that you can then collect signatures. You need over 320 signatures in order to get on the ballot. And then once you have those signatures, you would be on the ballot this year, provided you live in the district boundaries and you meet all the qualifications to run. But I highly encourage people, if you are interested in having a seat at the table, then go out there, get the signatures and run and be part of this board in the future. With that, thank you to everybody that's paid attention all this time. That's the end of my report. And now I can entertain a motion for us to adjourn.
Yeah, great. Yeah. The pay is great. The pay is great. I move to adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
Having a person a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I'm also yay. Motion passes. Thank you guys. Have a good night.